New York City, 1972. The arena was already shaking before Elvis Presley even stepped onto the stage. Thousands of voices rose together, creating a wall of sound that seemed to reach the ceiling. Some fans held handmade signs above their heads. Others carried photographs of Elvis. A few were crying before the show had even begun. Outside, people were still trying to find tickets. Inside, the lights slowly disappeared. One by one, the conversations stopped. Then, a single spotlight appeared, and the crowd exploded. Elvis walked onto the stage wearing his famous white performance outfit, his dark hair carefully swept back, his guitar hanging against his chest. He stood there for a moment, looking across the enormous crowd. He smiled. The screaming became even louder. For most people in that arena, this was supposed to be an unforgettable night because they were going to see Elvis Presley live. But somewhere near the front of the crowd, a 9-year-old girl had come for a completely different reason. Her name was Emma, and according to the doctors, she might not have much time left. Emma sat quietly in a wheelchair beside her mother. She was wearing a pale pink dress. Her hands were resting nervously in her lap. Unlike everyone around her, she wasn't screaming. She wasn't waving a sign. She wasn't trying to get Elvis's attention. She was simply staring at the stage. Because for months, she had talked about only one thing: meeting Elvis Presley. Her mother had told her it might never happen. But that night, somehow, they had made it. Emma had been getting weaker for a long time. There were days when she couldn't leave her bed. There were mornings when simply getting dressed exhausted her. And there were nights when her mother sat beside her, pretending everything was going to be all right. Emma knew something was wrong. Children often understand more than adults think they do. She knew why her mother cried in the kitchen when she thought Emma couldn't hear. She knew why doctors spoke quietly when they entered the room. And she knew why everyone kept saying things like, "We just need to stay positive." So when Emma heard that Elvis would be performing in New York, she made one request. She wanted to see him. Just once. Her mother had spent everything she could to make it happen. And now they were sitting only a few rows from the stage. Emma looked at her mother. "Do you think he'll see me?" Her mother smiled through trembling lips. "I hope so, sweetheart." Emma looked back toward the stage. "I don't need him to talk to me." She paused. "I just want him to know I came." Her mother reached down and squeezed her hand. Then the music began. Elvis started the show with the confidence of a man who had spent years commanding enormous crowds. The band played. The lights moved across the arena. Thousands of people sang along. For a while, Emma forgot about everything. She forgot about doctors. She forgot about hospitals. She forgot about the frightening conversations she wasn't supposed to hear. She simply watched Elvis. He moved across the stage. He smiled at the audience. He spoke between songs. And every time he looked toward the crowd, Emma wondered if his eyes would somehow find her. Her mother noticed the change in her daughter's face. Emma was glowing. For the first time in weeks, she looked completely happy. Then, during one of the songs, something happened. Emma slowly reached into her small bag. She pulled out a folded piece of cardboard. Her mother looked at it. She had seen it before. Emma had made it herself. The words were written in large, uneven letters. "Elvis, I don't want to die before I meet you." Her mother immediately became emotional. "Emma, I just want him to see it. Maybe you shouldn't hold that up." "Why?" Her mother couldn't answer. Because she didn't want Elvis to see it. She didn't want thousands of strangers to see it. She didn't want her daughter's illness to become something people stared at. But Emma raised the sign anyway. Slowly, carefully. She held it above her head. At first, nothing happened. Elvis continued performing. The lights moved. The audience screamed. Emma lowered the sign. Then she raised it again. And this time, Elvis looked directly toward her. He stopped moving. It lasted only a second, maybe two. But Emma knew. He had seen it. Her eyes widened. She pointed toward herself, then toward the sign. Elvis looked again. His expression changed. The smile disappeared. He leaned toward one of the musicians. Something was said. The music continued for several seconds. Then Elvis slowly lifted his hand. The band stopped. The entire arena seemed to freeze. Thousands of people stared toward the stage. Elvis walked toward the edge. He looked into the crowd. Then he said quietly, "Who's holding that sign?" Emma's mother immediately put her hands over her mouth. Emma raised her hand. The spotlight shifted. Suddenly, the entire arena could see her. A little girl in a pink dress, sitting in a wheelchair, holding a piece of cardboard with trembling hands. Elvis stared at her. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he lowered his microphone. He turned toward his band. "Give me a minute." And he walked toward the stairs. The crowd began whispering. Nobody knew what was happening. The security guards looked confused. The musicians stood silently. And Elvis Presley walked down from the stage, straight toward Emma. If you're listening to this story right now, stop for a second and imagine that moment. Thousands of people, one enormous arena, and one little girl who never expected anything more than being noticed. What would you do if you were sitting in that audience? Would you have started crying? Would you have reached for your phone? Or would you simply have stood there in silence? Quick question for you. Do you believe celebrities should stop everything when they see someone in the audience who genuinely needs help? Write yes or no in the comments. And tell us where you're watching from. New York, London, Los Angeles, India, Uzbekistan, or somewhere else in the world. If this story is already pulling you in, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because what Elvis did next was something nobody in that arena expected. Elvis reached the front row. A security guard stepped forward. But Elvis gently raised his hand. "That's okay." He looked at Emma. Then he crouched down. For the first time that night, the superstar wasn't looking at thousands of people. He wasn't looking at cameras. He wasn't thinking about the next song. He was looking at one child. "What's your name?" Emma's lips trembled. "Emma." Elvis smiled softly. "Emma." He repeated her name as though he wanted to remember it. "That's a beautiful name." Emma stared at him. "You really came down." Elvis gave a quiet laugh. "Well, you asked me to." Emma looked confused. "I did?" Elvis pointed toward the sign. "You said you wanted to meet me." She nodded. "But I didn't think you would." That sentence hit Elvis differently. His smile disappeared again. He looked at Emma's mother, then back at the little girl. "Why wouldn't I?" Emma didn't answer. Her mother did. "She's been very sick." Elvis remained silent. The audience could see the change in his face. He wasn't performing anymore. He was listening. Emma's mother leaned toward him. "The doctors don't know how much time she has." Elvis looked down. For several seconds, he said nothing. The arena was completely silent. No screaming, no applause, no music. Just thousands of people waiting. Emma noticed the sadness in Elvis's eyes. She reached out. "Don't be sad." Elvis looked at her. "I'm not sad." Emma smiled. "Yes, you are." A few people in the crowd laughed softly through their tears. Elvis smiled again. "Maybe you're right." He took her hand. Then he said something so quietly that only the people closest to him could hear. "How long have you been waiting to see me?" Emma thought for a moment. Almost my whole life. Elvis laughed. Well, then I owe you a lot of time. Emma shook her head. You don't owe me anything. Elvis stared at her. Then he stood. He looked toward the stage. The musicians were still waiting. The audience was still waiting. But Elvis wasn't ready to return. Not yet. He looked back at Emma. Would you like to come up there with me? Emma's eyes became enormous. On the stage? Elvis nodded. Her mother immediately became nervous. I don't know if she can. Elvis interrupted gently. We'll take it slow. Two security staff members carefully prepared to help move the wheelchair. The crowd began applauding, not screaming, not the wild applause Elvis usually received. This was different. It was warm, gentle, almost protective. Emma looked terrified. She grabbed Elvis's hand. Don't let go. Elvis squeezed her hand. I won't. And then, together, they began moving toward the stage. As Emma's wheelchair reached the stage, thousands of people stood. Some were crying, some were smiling, others simply watched with their hands over their mouths. Elvis stepped beside her. He looked at the audience. Then he looked down at Emma. You know something? Emma shook her head. Tonight was supposed to be my show. He paused. But I think we got that wrong. Emma smiled. Elvis pointed toward her. Tonight belongs to Emma. The audience erupted. Emma covered her face. She was crying. Her mother was crying. Even several musicians turned away for a moment to hide their emotions. Elvis leaned toward the microphone. Everybody say hello to Emma. The entire arena answered. Hello, Emma. Emma looked around in disbelief. Thousands of strangers were saying her name. She turned toward Elvis. You made them do that. Elvis smiled. No. He shook his head. They wanted to. Then Emma noticed something. Elvis's guitar was still hanging from his shoulder. She pointed toward it. Do you play that for everybody? Elvis smiled. Most nights. Can you play something for me? Elvis looked at the musicians. Then at Emma. What would you like? Emma hesitated. She didn't know the name of a song. She only knew what she wanted. Something pretty. The musicians exchanged glances. Elvis slowly sat down near the piano. The lights dimmed. The arena became quiet again. Emma sat a few feet away from him, and Elvis began to play. Softly. Slowly. No dramatic entrance. No screaming. No flashing lights. Just music. For the first time that evening, the largest arena in New York felt like a tiny room. Emma watched him. Her mother held her hand, and Elvis played as though there were nobody else in the world. But nobody in that arena knew yet that this quiet moment was only the beginning. Because before the night was over, Elvis was going to make a decision that would change Emma's life, and possibly change his own. And that is where the real story was only beginning. First notes were almost impossible to hear. The arena, which only minutes earlier had been shaking with thousands of voices, had become almost completely silent. Elvis sat near the piano, his hands moving gently across the keys. Emma watched him without blinking. She had dreamed about this moment for so long that she was almost afraid to breathe. Her mother stood behind her wheelchair, one hand resting on Emma's shoulder. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her daughter had come to the concert hoping Elvis might notice her. Now Elvis Presley was sitting only a few feet away, playing just for her. When the melody ended, Elvis looked toward Emma. Was that pretty enough? Emma nodded. Very. Elvis smiled. Good. He stood and walked toward her. Then he noticed something. Emma's breathing had changed. Her mother noticed it too. Emma? The girl's smile disappeared. She closed her eyes for a moment. Her mother immediately moved closer. "Sweetheart, look at me." Emma opened her eyes. "I'm okay." But Elvis knew she wasn't. He looked toward the side of the stage. "Do we have a doctor here?" Within seconds, several members of the staff rushed forward. The crowd began murmuring. Elvis stepped back, giving Emma's mother room, but he didn't leave. He stayed beside her. The arena lights remained dim. Nobody knew what to do. Then Emma whispered, "Don't stop." Elvis leaned closer. "Don't stop what?" "The music." Elvis looked at her. "You want me to keep playing?" She nodded. "Please." He turned toward the musicians. "Keep it soft." The band understood. The music began again. This time, Elvis didn't sing. He simply stood beside Emma while the musicians played. Her breathing slowly became calmer. Her mother wiped tears from her face. And for a few minutes, the entire arena seemed to breathe with the little girl. There are moments in life when thousands of people can become completely silent for one person. This was one of those moments. If you were in that arena, what would you have done? Would you have prayed for Emma? Would you have cried? Or would you have simply stood there and watched? Quick question for everyone listening. Do you think Elvis made the right decision by stopping his concert for Emma? Write yes or no in the comments. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. If you're enjoying the story, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and stay until the end, because the decision Elvis was about to make would surprise everyone around him. After several minutes, Emma's breathing became steadier. The doctor who had been called backstage quietly spoke with her mother. "She needs to rest." Her mother nodded. Elvis heard the conversation. He looked at Emma. "Do you want to go home?" Emma shook her head. "No." "Are you sure?" "I came to see you." Elvis smiled. "Well, you've already done that." Emma looked toward the enormous crowd. "I want to hear you sing." Elvis glanced toward his band. Then he looked at the audience. The crowd was waiting. He could have returned to his original set list. He could have started another energetic number, but he didn't. Instead, he walked toward the microphone. He turned toward Emma. "How about we do one together?" Emma looked shocked. "Me?" "Yeah, I can't sing." Elvis smiled. "Neither can half the people in this arena." The crowd laughed. Emma laughed too. For the first time that night, the tension broke. Elvis looked at the audience. "She's nervous." A voice from the crowd shouted, "We love you, Emma!" The audience repeated it. "We love you, Emma." Emma began crying again. Elvis leaned down. "See?" He pointed toward the audience. "You've got a whole lot of friends tonight." Emma wiped her eyes. Then Elvis started singing softly. Emma didn't know all the words, but she quietly joined him. Her voice was tiny, almost impossible to hear. Yet the microphone picked up just enough, and thousands of people heard it. The arena erupted. Emma covered her face. Elvis laughed. "That's my girl." He continued singing. But halfway through the song, he noticed Emma looking toward her mother. There was something in her expression, something Elvis couldn't ignore. He stopped. "What's wrong?" Emma looked down. "My mom is sad." Elvis turned toward her mother. She tried to smile. "I'm fine." Emma shook her head. "She's not." Elvis walked toward her. "Ma'am?" Emma's mother looked at him. "Yes?" "Come up here." She shook her head. "No, no. This is her moment." Elvis smiled. "Tonight is her moment because of you." The audience applauded. Emma's mother slowly walked onto the stage. She stood beside her daughter. Elvis looked at both of them. Then he said, "Sometimes people forget that the strongest person in the room isn't always the one on the stage." Emma's mother began crying. Elvis placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You've been fighting too." She nodded. "I'd do anything for her." Elvis looked at Emma. "I believe you." The concert continued, but it was no longer a normal concert. Every few minutes, Elvis looked toward Emma. Sometimes he smiled, sometimes he waved, and every time he did, Emma smiled back. But backstage, something else was happening. Elvis's manager had received information about Emma's condition. He had spoken privately with her mother. The situation was worse than most people realized. Emma wasn't simply sick. Her family had been struggling financially for months. Medical bills had piled up. Her mother had reduced her working hours because Emma needed constant care. They had already sold many of their belongings. And now there was a possibility that they might lose their home. Elvis listened quietly. Then he asked one question. "How much do they need?" His manager hesitated. "Elvis, this isn't something you can just solve tonight." Elvis looked at him. "I didn't ask that." He repeated, "How much do they need?" The manager gave him an estimate. Elvis stared at the floor. Then he reached into his pocket. He pulled out his wallet. "Take care of the immediate bills." His manager looked surprised. "All of them?" Elvis nodded. "All of them." "And the future treatment?" Elvis looked toward the stage. Emma was still watching him. "We'll figure that out tomorrow." There was one problem. Elvis didn't want anyone to know. He didn't want newspapers. He didn't want cameras. He didn't want headlines. He didn't want people saying Elvis Presley had saved a sick child. He simply wanted Emma to have one good night. But his manager warned him, "If we do this, somebody might find out." Elvis shrugged. "Then let them." He paused. "But don't make it about me." That sentence would become important later, because by the next morning, someone would discover what Elvis had done, and the story would begin spreading. Later that evening, the concert reached its final moments. The original schedule was completely gone. Elvis had spent far more time with Emma than anyone expected. The musicians had adjusted. The crew had adjusted. Even the audience had adjusted. Nobody complained. Nobody wanted the moment to end. Finally, Elvis stood in the center of the stage. He looked toward Emma, then toward the crowd. "Before we finish tonight," he paused, "I want to say something." The audience became quiet. Elvis walked toward Emma. He crouched beside her. "Emma?" She looked at him. "Yes? Are you scared?" She thought about it. Then she whispered, "Sometimes." Elvis nodded. "I think everybody gets scared sometimes." He looked at the crowd. "Even me." The audience reacted with surprise. Elvis smiled. "But you know what my mother used to tell me?" Emma shook her head. "She said you can't always choose what happens to you." He paused. "But you can choose what you do with the time you have." Emma listened carefully. Elvis continued. "So tonight," he gently touched the side of her wheelchair, "you chose to come here." Emma smiled. "And I'm glad you did." The audience erupted in applause. Elvis stood. Then he did something unexpected. He removed the long scarf around his neck. He held it up. The crowd immediately recognized it. Then Elvis walked over to Emma. He gently placed it around her shoulders. Emma looked down at it. "For me?" "For you." She touched the scarf. "I can't take this." Elvis laughed. "Too late." The audience laughed. Emma smiled. Then Elvis took one of his rings from his hand. He looked at it for a moment. Then he placed it in Emma's palm. Her mother immediately said, "Elvis, that's too much." He shook his head. "No," he looked at Emma. "It's just a reminder." "A reminder of what?" Elvis smiled. "That tonight really happened." The audience stood again. Thousands of people applauded. But then Emma said something that nobody expected. "Elvis!" He leaned closer. "Yes? Will you remember me?" Elvis froze. It was such a simple question, but it hit him harder than anything else that night. He looked into her eyes. Then he answered, "I will." Emma stared at him. "Promise." Elvis held out his little finger. "Promise." Emma wrapped her little finger around his. The crowd began crying and applauding at the same time. Elvis looked down at their hands. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "That's a promise." The concert finally came to an end. Elvis walked back toward the stage entrance, but he stopped before leaving. He turned around. Emma was still there. He walked back to her one last time. "Emma?" "Yes?" "I'll see you again." Her mother looked at Elvis. She knew what he meant, but she also knew something else. Nobody could promise what tomorrow would bring. Elvis didn't know either, yet he said it anyway. "I'll see you again." Then he disappeared backstage. Emma watched him go. Her mother knelt beside her. "Are you happy?" Emma smiled. "The happiest I've ever been." Her mother hugged her, but neither of them knew that the night wasn't finished. Because backstage, Elvis was waiting for one phone call. And when that phone call finally came, his expression changed completely. The person on the other end of the line had information about Emma's medical condition. Information that Elvis hadn't heard before. He slowly sat down. His manager asked, "What is it?" Elvis didn't answer immediately. He looked at the stage, then toward the empty hallway where Emma had disappeared. Finally, he said, "How much time?" His manager looked at him. "What?" Elvis's voice became quieter. "How much time does she have?" There was silence. Then the answer came, and Elvis closed his eyes. Because the number was much smaller than anyone in that arena had imagined. And suddenly, the promise Elvis had made to a 9-year-old girl became much more difficult than simply saying, "I'll see you again." The hallway behind the stage was almost empty. The roar of the audience had faded into the distance, replaced by the quiet sounds of crew members packing equipment and musicians discussing the unexpected changes to the show. But Elvis wasn't listening to any of it. He was sitting alone in a chair, staring at the floor. His manager stood several feet away. Neither man spoke for a long time. Finally, Elvis looked up. "How much time?" His manager took a slow breath. "The doctors aren't certain." Elvis's jaw tightened. "But?" "They're worried she may not have much." Elvis looked away. The words seemed to hang in the air. Not much. A little girl who had spent her evening smiling, laughing, and holding Elvis's hand might have been living through one of the final good nights of her life. Elvis stood suddenly. "Where is she?" "Her mother is taking her home." "Then let's go." His manager stared at him. "Elvis, you just finished a concert." "I know. You have another appearance tomorrow." "I know. You haven't slept properly in days." Elvis looked at him. "She doesn't have another tomorrow." The room became silent. His manager knew there was no point arguing. Outside the arena, the night air was cold. Emma and her mother were waiting near the car. Emma was still wearing Elvis's scarf. She kept touching it. Her mother noticed. "You really love that scarf." Emma smiled. "It smells like the stage." Her mother laughed softly. Then Emma became quiet. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Do you think he really meant it?" "What?" "When he said he'd see me again." Her mother looked at her daughter. She wanted to say yes without hesitation, but she knew how dangerous promises could be. So she simply smiled. "I think Elvis meant every word." Emma nodded. Then something unexpected happened. A black car slowly pulled up beside them. The door opened. Elvis stepped out. Emma's eyes became enormous. "Elvis?" He smiled. "I told you I'd see you again." Emma began laughing. Her mother covered her mouth in disbelief. "You came back?" Elvis nodded. "I wasn't ready to say good night." Emma smiled. "You don't have to." Elvis looked at her mother. "Would it be okay if I walked with you for a little while?" She nodded. The three of them walked slowly along the quiet sidewalk. No stage, no microphones, no screaming fans. Just three people under the streetlights. Emma told Elvis about her favorite things. She liked horses. She liked drawing. She liked chocolate milk. She hated broccoli. Elvis laughed when she told him that. "I hated broccoli too." Her mother smiled. "You still do." Elvis looked at her. "That's classified information." Emma laughed. For several minutes, the conversation felt completely normal. And that was exactly what Elvis wanted. He didn't want to talk about hospitals. He didn't want to talk about death. He didn't want Emma to feel like everyone was treating her differently. He simply wanted to talk to her like a child. Eventually, Emma asked, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you ever lonely?" The question caught Elvis off guard. He looked toward the street. "Sometimes." "But you're famous." Elvis smiled. "Being surrounded by people isn't the same as not being lonely." Emma thought about that. Then she said, "I get lonely too." Elvis nodded. "Then maybe we're not so different." Emma smiled. A few minutes later, Emma's mother received a phone call. Her expression changed. Elvis immediately noticed. "What happened?" She stepped away. When she returned, her eyes were filled with tears. "The doctor wants her back at the hospital." Emma heard her. "No." Her mother knelt beside her. "Sweetheart." "No. I don't want to go." "I know. I want tonight to stay like this." Elvis crouched beside Emma. "Hey!" She looked at him. "How about we make a deal?" "What kind of deal?" "You go to the hospital." Emma frowned. "And?" "And tomorrow we figure out something special." She looked at him suspiciously. "Promise?" Elvis held out his little finger. "Promise." Emma hooked her finger around his. "If you're still listening, this is the moment I'd like to ask you something. Would you make a promise to a child if you weren't sure you could keep it? Write yes or no in the comments. And tell us what city or country you're watching from. If this story is touching your heart, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more people. Now, let's continue. At the hospital, Emma was taken inside. Elvis remained outside with her mother. He had promised not to leave. A nurse eventually came out. "Mr. Presley?" Elvis stood. "Yes?" "Her mother is with her." "How is she?" The nurse hesitated. "She's very tired." Elvis looked through the glass doors. He could see Emma's mother sitting beside her bed. Emma was asleep. The scarf Elvis had given her was folded carefully beside her. Elvis stared at it. Then he asked, "Can I see her?" The nurse nodded. He entered quietly. Emma opened her eyes. "Elvis?" "I'm here." She smiled. "I knew you would come." Elvis sat beside her. "You called me." "I didn't." "You thought about me." Emma smiled. "Maybe." Elvis looked at the small hospital room. It was completely different from the arena. No thousands of people, no lights, no music. Just a small bed and a frightened family. Emma looked at him. "Can I tell you my biggest dream?" Elvis nodded. "I want to see the ocean." Elvis smiled. "That's your biggest dream?" "Yes." "You've never seen it?" She shook her head. Her mother looked down. They had never had the money or the opportunity. Emma continued, I want to hear the waves. Elvis looked at her. Then he said something that made her mother look up. Then we'll find a way. Her mother immediately shook her head. Elvis, you don't have to. I know. He looked at Emma. But I want to. The next morning, Elvis canceled several plans. His staff questioned the decision, but Elvis was determined. He wanted to take Emma somewhere she had never been. The ocean. There was one problem. Emma was still in the hospital. Her doctors weren't comfortable with the idea of her traveling. Elvis didn't argue. Instead, he asked, "Then how can we bring the ocean to her?" Nobody understood the question until Elvis began making phone calls. He contacted musicians. He contacted technicians. He contacted people who could help. He wanted to create something inside the hospital. Not a concert. Not a performance. Something Emma could remember. That evening, the hospital corridor began filling with people. A small piano was brought into the room. A few musicians arrived. Someone brought recordings of ocean waves. Another person brought photographs of beaches. Emma's mother stood in the doorway, completely stunned. Elvis walked into the room. Emma looked at him. "What is all this?" Elvis smiled. "You wanted to see the ocean." Emma looked around. "But there's no ocean." "Give me 5 minutes." The lights were dimmed. The sound of waves began playing softly. The piano started. Elvis sat beside Emma. He didn't perform like he had in the arena. He simply sang softly. Emma closed her eyes. The sound of waves filled the room. For a moment, she imagined herself standing on a beach. She could almost feel the wind, almost smell the salt, almost hear the water breaking against the shore. When the song ended, Emma opened her eyes. She was crying. That was beautiful. Elvis smiled. Not as good as the real thing. Emma looked at him. Will I get to see the real ocean? Elvis paused. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to take hope away from her. We're going to try. The next few days became a race against time. Elvis's team quietly worked with Emma's doctors. They searched for a way to take her somewhere safe. A private medical arrangement was considered. Transportation was discussed. Everything had to be carefully planned. But there was another problem. Emma's condition was getting worse. One afternoon, Elvis received a phone call. He was told Emma had taken a sudden turn. He immediately stopped what he was doing. Take me there. His driver hurried him to the hospital. When Elvis arrived, Emma was unconscious. Her mother was sitting beside her. She looked exhausted. Elvis entered the room slowly. He stood beside the bed. For once, he had no joke, no clever words, no performance. He simply reached down and took Emma's hand. Her mother looked at him. I'm scared. Elvis nodded. So am I. She looked surprised. He continued, but we're going to stay with her. They remained there for hours. The room was quiet. Eventually, Emma's eyes opened. She looked toward Elvis. Did you come? Elvis smiled through tears. I told you. Emma's voice was weak. You keep your promises. Elvis squeezed her hand. I try. She looked at him. Did you bring the ocean? Elvis laughed softly. Not yet. Emma smiled. Then hurry. Those 3 words broke something inside him, because Elvis knew they were running out of time. That night, Elvis walked out of the hospital and stood beneath the cold New York sky. His manager approached. What do you want to do? Elvis didn't hesitate. Everything. Everything? Everything we can. He looked back toward the hospital. I don't care what it costs. His manager nodded. Then Elvis said, and I don't want anyone to know. Elvis. I mean it. He paused. If she gets her ocean, that's enough. The following morning, The doctors finally gave them a narrow window. A short trip might be possible, but only if everything went perfectly. Elvis didn't wait. The arrangements began immediately. Emma didn't know yet. Her mother was told to pack a small bag. When Emma asked why, her mother smiled. "We're going somewhere." "Where?" "You'll see." A few hours later, Emma was carefully moved outside. She looked around. Then she saw Elvis waiting. He was standing beside a car. He smiled. "Ready?" Emma's eyes widened. "Where are we going?" Elvis opened the door. "To keep a promise." Emma looked at her mother, then at Elvis, and suddenly she understood. "The ocean?" Elvis nodded. "The ocean." Emma smiled. But neither Elvis nor her mother knew what was waiting for them at the shore, because when they finally arrived, something happened that none of them had planned, something that would make Elvis realize that sometimes the person you think you're saving may actually be the one saving you. The car finally stopped. Emma looked through the window. For a moment, she didn't understand what she was seeing. Then she heard it. The waves. She slowly turned toward her mother. "Is that?" Her mother was already crying. "Yes, sweetheart." Emma looked toward Elvis. He smiled. "The ocean." They carefully took Emma onto the beach. The wind moved gently through her hair. The sound of the waves grew louder. Emma closed her eyes. She didn't speak. She simply listened. Elvis stood beside her. For the first time that night, there was no music playing from speakers. No screaming crowd. No spotlight. No cameras. Only the ocean. Emma whispered, "It's even louder than I imagined." Elvis smiled. "Yeah." She looked at him. "Thank you." Elvis shook his head. "Don't thank me." "Why?" "Because you reminded me that some things are more important than a concert." Emma smiled. Then she asked, "Will you remember this?" Elvis looked toward the horizon. "I don't think I'll ever forget it." They stayed there only a short time. The doctors had warned them not to push Emma too far. But those few minutes were enough. Emma listened to the waves. She touched the sand. She watched the sunlight disappear over the water. And before they left, she gave Elvis something, a small drawing. It showed 3 people standing beside the ocean: Emma, her mother, and Elvis. At the top, she had written, "Thank you for stopping." Elvis stared at the drawing, his eyes filled with tears. "You know," he whispered, "I think I'll keep this forever." Emma smiled. "You better." He carefully folded the drawing and placed it inside his jacket. Several weeks later, Elvis returned to the stage. Thousands of fans filled the arena. The lights came up. The orchestra began playing. But before the first song, Elvis walked to the microphone. He looked across the audience. Then he said, "Sometimes, in the middle of a busy life, someone reminds you what really matters." He didn't mention Emma's name. He didn't tell the audience about the hospital. He didn't tell them about the ocean. He simply smiled. "And tonight, I'd like to dedicate this song to someone very special." The music began. Elvis sang. But backstage, inside his jacket, was the little drawing Emma had given him. Months passed. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. Elvis opened it himself. It was from Emma's mother. The letter explained that Emma's condition had remained difficult, but she had never stopped talking about that night. She kept Elvis's scarf beside her bed. She kept the ring in a small box. And whenever she was afraid, she listened to a recording of ocean waves. At the bottom of the letter was a short message written in Emma's handwriting. "Dear Elvis, I still remember the ocean, and I still remember that you kept your promise." Elvis read the message twice. Then he quietly folded the letter. He placed it beside Emma's drawing. For a long time, he sat alone. Then he smiled through his tears, because he understood something. He had thought he was stopping a concert for a dying little girl. But Emma had given him something too. She had reminded him that behind every screaming crowd was a human being. Behind every spotlight was a life. And sometimes, the most important performance wasn't the one in front of thousands of people. It was the moment when you stopped, looked someone in the eyes, and simply said, "I'm here." If this story touched your heart, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And answer one final question. If you could give one unforgettable moment to someone who had very little time left, what would you give them? Because sometimes, one night can become an entire lifetime of memories.